My boyfriend's secretary was a rather ditzy intern. She volunteered to plan our wedding but kept making mistakes. First, she replaced our wedding photo with a barefaced photo of me. Then she deleted my name from the invitation. On the wedding day, she even deliberately tore my wedding dress, asking me to wear the bridesmaid's dress instead. When I refused, she started to cry. I didn't mean to, I'm just a bit confused. My boyfriend defended her. She's young and doesn't know any better. Can't you be less serious? They locked me in the dressing room for reflection and went to toast and receive blessings from our relatives. I sneered and simply changed the groom. The wedding was half an hour away, and I was trembling with anger in my ripped wedding dress. I had explicitly told Rose to keep the dress in the hotel, but she insisted on putting it in the washing machine, ruining the delicate lace with the rhinestones and wrinkling the entire dress, making it completely unwearable. Rose said pitifully, "I'm sorry, sister. I didn't mean to. I just wanted you to look beautiful at the wedding. I was just trying to help. Help me." I laughed bitterly, coldly replying, "This is a high-end custom-made wedding dress worth $500,000. You just threw it into the washing machine without thinking twice. Can you afford to pay for ruining the wedding?" Rose's face turned pale immediately, and she looked like she was about to cry. "It's just a wedding dress. Do you have to be so mean?" My fiancé, Mark, came over. But instead of worrying about the imminent wedding, he gently wiped away Rose's tears and comforted her. Seeing my ugly expression, he said impatiently, "I'll have someone send you another wedding dress, okay?" No matter what, Rose meant well. "Why are you so picky?" Without waiting for my response, he took Rose's hand and left me there. I almost couldn't help but slap them both. It was my bridesmaid who stopped me and whispered, "Lisa, don't be upset. We can deal with this after the wedding." I took a deep breath and nodded. Mark and I came from similar backgrounds, and our marriage was not just between us, but also involved our families. The wedding had invited all the big shots in the business circle. I couldn't let others see the joke. Unlike Rose, she started as Mark's assistant a year ago. She was young and beautiful but clumsy, and she had made countless mistakes which made me dislike her. But Mark thought I looked down on her because of her background and was prejudiced against her. Before the wedding, Rose, as an assistant, volunteered to plan the wedding, but first she forgot to write my name on the invitation. Then she replaced the wedding photo with a barefaced photo, and even claimed that everything was just out of kindness. "I'm just a little bit confused, but my heart is in the right place," she cried pitifully. "It's just that my sister doesn't like me, so everything I do is wrong." That was ridiculous. She wasn't just careless, she was both stupid and malicious. I had planned to deal with her after the wedding, but I underestimated how disgusting she could be. As I was changing out of the ruined wedding dress in the dressing room, the door was suddenly pushed open roughly. Rose pointed her camera directly at me and said with a smirk, "Lisa, I'm here to take a commemorative video of your wedding. Come on, bride, smile for the camera." I was both shocked and angry. "Who let you in? Get out." If I hadn't zipped up my dress quickly, I don't know what else she would have filmed. Rose was stunned for a moment, then started to cry. "I just wanted to apologize for the dress. You can't scold me even if you look down on me." I was completely fed up and said directly, "Are you leaving on your own, or should I call someone?" Rose didn't expect me to be so direct. A flash of resentment crossed her eyes, and then she pretended to be pitiful, dropping the camera and kneeling in front of me. "I know I'm stupid and unpopular, but Mr. Gao is very important to me. Please don't kick me out. I won't do anything. I just want to stay here and witness your wedding. If you really think I'm in the way, then hit me." I was so angry I could laugh. There was no point in talking to this White Lotus. I was about to call someone to take her away, but as soon as I raised my hand, she started crying, as if I had done something to her. Before I could even make the call, a hand suddenly reached out from behind and slapped my phone out of my hand. I looked up and saw Mark grabbing my hand angrily. "Lisa, what are you doing? Are you determined to ruin the wedding? I think the ones who are crazy are the two of you," I said with a cold face. "Now get someone to get her out of here immediately, Mark, unless you don't want to get married." Note: White Lotus is a Chinese internet slang term referring to a seemingly innocent and pure person who is actually manipulative and cunning. I've used a more neutral term here to avoid cultural misunderstandings for a wider audience. Are you threatening me? Mark's face turned ugly. Lisa, I'm so tired of your spoiled brat attitude. Why can't you learn from Rose? We're about to get married, and you're still throwing a tantrum. Do you think I'm afraid to deal with you? He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip so strong it felt like he was going to crush my bones. He dragged me directly to the door of the bridal suite and pushed me in. I think you need to calm down. I was thrown hard to the ground. When I looked up, I found that he was about to lock the door. Mark, I rubbed my wrist, my anger turning into a cold calm. Without a bride, the wedding will be exposed immediately. I advise you to think about the consequences. Mark hesitated when he heard this, but then Rose came over and said hypocritically, Sister Lisa, don't be angry with Mark. You're about to get married and you're still so unreasonable. What are you going to do in the future? Mark's expression immediately changed, and he sneered, Don't think too highly of yourself. Without you, of course I'll take Rose to toast. As for you, when you learn to be obedient, you can come out. With that, he didn't hesitate any longer and slammed the door shut without mercy. What an idiot. Outside the door, I could vaguely hear their voices. Don't worry about her. Rose, I'll take you to meet my family. My uncle came back from abroad specially for the wedding. The sound gradually faded away. Leaning against the door, I felt a chill run through my body. Born into a wealthy family, I've never had much control over my own life. I chose Mark because of the Gao family behind him, for the sake of the family's interests. Now it's all been ruined by those two idiots. Outside, the wedding music played on, while the bride was still confined in this dark room. I was utterly disappointed and had already begun to consider other more suitable wealthy families. Just then, a strange and unpleasant scent suddenly wafted in through the crack in the door. Covering my nose and mouth, I called out loudly, Who's there? A light female voice came from outside. I heard this fragrance can make people horny like animals, Lisa. Do you like this gift? It was Rose. Why do you always get in the way between me and Mark? It's all your fault. She left after saying that, leaving me alone in the room, forced to inhale the fragrance. The scent of the incense grew stronger and stronger, and my head began to feel dizzy, and my body felt hot. I couldn't go on like this. I staggered to my feet, found a chair, and smashed it hard against the door. A dull thud echoed down the corridor, but no one came. It seemed like everyone had been taken away by Rose. What to do? My strength was exhausted, and I finally fell to the ground. Could she really get away with this? Just when I was completely desperate, I suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. The door was pulled open. I raised my head with the last of my strength and saw a familiar face. The man in the doorway was wearing a neat suit, his hair combed neatly, revealing sharp brows and eyes, and his whole person exuded a cold and unapproachable aura. Tom, the man sneered and said in a low voice, Is this the new man you found? Lisa, your taste has gotten so bad since you left me. A flurry of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Rose led the way, rushing towards the bridal suite and shouting, I saw it by accident. I saw a man going towards the dressing room, and Lisa was very intimate with him. They were even kissing. She's about to get married. How could she do something so outrageous? Someone nearby doubted. Could there be some misunderstanding? Lisa isn't that kind of person. Yeah, maybe you saw wrong? Mark's angry voice followed closely behind. What misunderstanding could there be? Rose saw it with her own eyes. That bitch. She still told me that someone else ruined the wedding dress. It must be her acting. She never wanted to get married from the beginning. Let's see how she explains this. Everyone gathered noisily at the door of the room. Rose took a key out of her pocket. Her expression was sad and resentful, but her eyes twinkled with excitement. The door was twisted open. The scene of me lying in a man's arms was seen by everyone. See, Rose exclaimed. I told you she was hiding a lover. However, Mark's shocked voice interrupted her abruptly. Uncle, English translation. The shout of uncle stunned everyone present. I was no exception, because the person in front of me was my ex-boyfriend. 3 years after breaking up with him, I officially got together with Mark. When we were dating, I often heard him talk about his uncle. Rumor has it that he is the real helmsman of the Gao family. 3 years ago, he led the family to rise, and at the age of 25, he relied on his ruthless investment skills to top the Forbes rich list, a true business prodigy. Mark has always idolized him. I never dreamed that Mark's idol and my ex-boyfriend would be the same person. After all, my ex-boyfriend should clearly be a poor boy. Tom's large palm covered my shocked gaze, also blocking the inquiring eyes of others. He smiled mockingly, the wild man. Misunderstanding, it's a misunderstanding. Mark grabbed Rose and scolded her. You idiot! What have you done? How could my uncle have anything to do with this crazy woman? Rose was about to cry. She stammered but couldn't say a word. Without waiting for her to reply, Mark turned around and immediately put on a flattering smile. Uncle, why are you here? Tom raised an eyebrow. I came here to relax. I didn't expect to see the bride locked in the room, and I happened to be a hero. Mark looked guilty. He glanced at me in Tom's arms, and quickly changed his tone to be arrogant. Uncle, don't be fooled by this woman. She's just throwing a tantrum and doesn't want to get married, and I just want to teach her a lesson. He glanced coldly at me. Lisa, you're pretending now? You even dare to pretend to be unconscious in my uncle's arms. You're so shameless. Now, no matter how absurd Mark said, I would no longer have any emotional ups and downs. I struggled to stand up, ignoring him, and instead asked Rose, who was hiding behind him and desperately trying to reduce her presence. Rose, you just said you saw a man kissing me, right? Then I ask you, who is that man? What does he look like? What color clothes is he wearing? And when did you see me meet a man? Since you saw it with your own eyes, you must have evidence, right? Hearing this, Mark seemed to have found a backbone and said triumphantly, Rose, don't be afraid to say it. I'll back you up. Let everyone see this woman's true colors. Rose had nowhere to hide and was exposed to the sight of the guests, and everyone was discussing it, asking her to produce evidence. She hardened her heart and said, I saw it. Just now that man was wearing a black shirt, very tall, and walked towards the dressing room. You must have hidden him. Mark asked triumphantly. Lisa, what else do you have to say? I smiled and said, I haven't seen the person you're talking about. However, someone did put an unknown incense in the room, trying to kill me. I suspect that the culprit is the man you saw, so call the police. Rose screamed, No, you can't call the police. She took a few steps forward, trying to grab my phone, but was stopped by Tom. Seeing that this didn't work, Rose immediately changed her strategy, forcing a reluctant smile. Sister Lisa, this must be a misunderstanding. There's no need to call the police. I saw wrong. You know, I'm always a little confused. Mark lovingly put his arm around her and said impatiently to me, Lisa, do you have paranoid delusions? Why would anyone want to harm you for no reason? You've only been locked up for a while, and you're acting crazy like this? If you apologize now, I can pretend nothing happened, and we can go back and have the wedding. You reminded me, Mark. I interrupted him, tearing off my veil and throwing it in front of him. I'm not playing along anymore. I'm not getting married either. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard Tom chuckle behind me. Sister Lisa, you don't do this. Mr. Gao definitely doesn't mean that. He really wants to marry you. Rose's face turned pale. She forced a smile. This is really a misunderstanding. Besides, we can check it ourselves. There's no need to alarm the police. Sister Lisa, why don't you call them back? I smiled slightly. Why are you in such a hurry? Are you guilty? Mark shouted. Who's guilty? Rose is kindly trying to persuade you, but you're biting her back. How could she be the murderer? I said calmly. I don't think she's the murderer either, but she hosted the wedding, and she was the one who saw the suspicious person. So it's normal to cooperate with the investigation, right? Mark didn't speak for a while. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, Okay. When it's found out that all this is your own doing, I'll see how you end up. English translation. While waiting, Rose used physical discomfort as an excuse to leave her seat repeatedly. Needless to say, she must have wanted to sabotage the surveillance equipment and destroy the evidence. I specially arranged for a bridesmaid to stay with her every step of the way, not allowing her any chance to act alone. Seeing that this was not working, Rose rolled her eyes and fainted directly. Everyone was panicked, and someone wanted to call a doctor. At this time, Tom said, "Since Lisa is unwell, let's send her to the next room to rest. The Gao family has a dedicated medical team, and Lisa won't be in any trouble." With something like this happening at a wedding, the host has no reason to leave first. After saying that, several doctors performed first aid on Rose. Rose couldn't pretend anymore. She looked around, and Tom simply called in a bodyguard, surrounding the scene and completely cutting off her desire to run. The police soon arrived at the scene. Although there was no surveillance installed in the dressing room, the corridor cameras recorded the whole truth. After Rose and Mark left hand in hand, she deliberately turned back once, tampered with things in the room, and arrogantly accused me. Then, apart from Tom coming to the rescue, no one else appeared. Not only that, but the process of her deliberately ruining the wedding dress was also clearly captured. The guests were in an uproar, condemning Mark and Rose for their actions. Someone even uploaded the video online. "No, this can't be." Rose collapsed on the ground, shocked. "I clearly already. How could it be Mark's uncle? It should clearly be someone else." "Lisa," the police interrupted her coldly. "The evidence is conclusive. Please come with us." With the ironclad evidence, Mark still insisted. "You haven't suffered any real harm, have you?" he said hatefully. "Lisa, are you so petty? If anything happens to Rose, I'll make you pay." "Mark, watch your words," Tom shouted. "I don't remember the family teaching you to treat your wife like this." Mark glanced at me resentfully and said sullenly, "Sorry, it was my fault." After saying that, he left me directly and strode towards the police car. "I'm really sorry for causing everyone to laugh at me." Tom supported me. Today's incident was Mark's fault, and this banquet is considered an apology from the Gao family to the Fong family, and also an apology to everyone. A wave of sourness arose in my heart. After breaking up with Tom, I took on the family business, and no one had protected me like he did. Even just now, he had been with me all the time. If it weren't for him, things wouldn't have been resolved so smoothly. At this time, the after effects of the incense came on, and I could no longer hold on, and completely lost consciousness. English translation: when I woke up, it was already the next morning. The ceiling was pure white, and I was lying in a hospital bed, getting in for drip. Tom was sitting in a chair next to me, fast asleep. After I fainted at the wedding, he rushed me to the hospital in a hurry. I didn't wake him up, but picked up my phone to check the messages. My phone was inundated with calls. There were calls from my parents, from friends, from Mark's parents, and from Mark himself. The messages were piled up like a mountain. Gao's parents kept apologizing to me and promised to deal with the absurd things Mark had done. My parents also comforted me. I replied one by one, and then clicked on the chat box with my bridesmaid. She gloatedly told me that Rose was suspected of intentional injury and would probably be sentenced. She also said that the reputation of this pair of dogs and men was completely ruined in the circle, and if she were Mark's parents, she would probably consider opening a small account. Everyone who mixes in this circle is a shrewd person. When Mark first chased me, he also made vows, saying that neither family nor love would make me lose. I'm not an 18-year-old naive girl, but I really tried to believe him. Now that I think about it, every word he said was particularly funny. At this moment, Mark's message popped up suddenly. I glanced through it roughly. From yesterday afternoon to this morning, he had sent dozens of messages persistently. The content was not unexpected. It was basically that he questioned why I had to be so ruthless, and also said that Rose was still young and could not have a criminal record. If I took the initiative to reconcile with Rose, he could pretend nothing happened and continue to marry me. In the future, if I become Mrs. Gao, he would absolutely not allow others to touch my position. I could almost guess his tone of condescension. I laughed. Was the position of Mrs. Gao such a hot commodity? What gave him the illusion that I couldn't live without him? Fortunately, I was still entrusting a lawyer to do a prenuptial property notarization and hadn't had time to get a marriage license. Otherwise, it would take a lot of effort to get a divorce. Ignoring his barrage of messages, I directly blocked him. Unexpectedly, his phone rang the next second. "Lisa, you blocked me?" How far are you going to be willful? You don't have the look of a woman at all. For such a small matter, you have to make a fuss. Can't you learn from Rose? I sneered. Learn how to harm people or learn to go to jail. Mark retorted. She didn't do it on purpose. Rose told the police that someone stuffed the incense into her bag, and she went back to find something. So she accidentally dropped it at the scene. Such a loophole-ridden testimony. Rose and Mark really dared to say and believe. Did she accidentally cut the wedding dress and stuff it into the washing machine? Mark retorted weakly. Well, that's because she loves me so much, so she was momentarily confused. Anyway, it didn't cause you any real harm, and you don't have to keep holding on to it, right? Why are you so serious? Before I could speak, a hand with distinct bones took the phone, and a voice with a little sleepiness said, Mark. Uncle? Mark raised his voice. Why are you? Tom interrupted him and said coldly, How did the Gao family give birth to such a fool? Then, he decisively hung up the call. 好的，没问题。以下是对第10段的英语翻译。English translation. The hospital room fell silent. Tom stood by the bed. His pale skin and dark circles under his eyes were particularly noticeable. He lowered his head, his eyes filled with a faint dissatisfaction. He had always been like this when we were dating. Clearly a poor boy who was focused on his studies. He had the temper of a young master, requiring me to coax him for a long time every morning. I paused and smiled wryly. Uncle? Tom looked at me, and after a while he didn't yield. Niece? I pressed my temples, not daring to think about what foolish thing I had done. I could almost foresee the day when my friends would repeatedly bring up the dark history of my engagement to Mark. Tom didn't urge me, he just stared at me fixedly. After thinking for a moment, I asked, Did you get rid of the person Rose arranged? At the wedding, she was so certain that I was cheating, and she even used an aphrodisiac incense. She must have made arrangements in advance. It was impossible that a living person would have simply vanished, unless Mark had a sudden change of heart. Tom didn't deny it. He didn't have an invitation, and he was sneaking around, so of course I could only ask security to remove the uninvited guest. After speaking, he smiled lightly and pushed the thermos cup beside him towards me. Okay, everyone has been caught, so don't worry about it anymore. Are you hungry? Eat something first. It was a bowl of warm shrimp porridge. The rice grains were cooked until they were blooming, exuding a rich aroma. I was startled. I didn't expect him to still remember my favorite flavor. I started dating Tom in college. If it was said that when you were young, you had to experience a passionate love once in your life to have no regrets, then I had indeed found fulfillment. At that time, we would also share a bowl of wonton under the eaves and climb mountains in the middle of the night just to watch the sunrise. He would remember all my likes and dislikes, use his scholarship to take me to see the aurora, and suddenly appear in the snowy field outside my house after a few hours' train ride to celebrate the new year with me. At that time, as I looked at his sparkling eyes, my heart beat like fireworks blooming in the sky. Tom was cold to outsiders, and he would deliberately pretend to be serious on many occasions, but in fact he would secretly blush, nervously grab my hand, and pretend to be strong, and then he would show off like a primary school student and ask me how I performed. I loved everything about him, and I wholeheartedly believed that we would be happy forever. However, we received everyone's blessings and each other's sincerity, but in the end, we couldn't resist reality. On the eve of graduation, the Fong family was framed and was very likely to face bankruptcy. I was so busy that I was overwhelmed. My mother told me that if I didn't think about the family, I should also think about his future. Tom's family was not wealthy, and he had finally made it to where he was today through his own efforts. I shouldn't drag him down, so I broke up with him. He begged me several times, saying that it didn't matter what difficulties there were, he could go through them with me. But I ruthlessly refused, and even made up a lie about falling in love with someone else. Later, he finally gave up, left without saying goodbye, and disappeared without a trace. I also buried this relationship in my heart. Later, the Gao family helped the Fong family overcome the crisis, both out of gratitude and to consolidate the alliance, so I chose to marry Mark. I never expected to meet him again at the wedding in such a humiliating way. And even more unexpectedly, he had transformed into my fiancé's uncle. I always thought he was a poor boy, but I didn't expect him to have deceived me for so many years. Could it be that all that love and sincerity was fake too? Thinking about it, even the shrimp porridge I swallowed tasted especially bitter. Doesn't it taste good? Tom asked me. I shook my head, hiding my sadness. Thank you for helping me with the wedding. If you need any help in the future, just call me. Tom stared at me and asked, Is that all you want to say to me? I lowered my eyes and didn't speak. His figure enveloped me, and his breath was very light. Don't you want to reminisce about the old days at all? The distance was too close, so close that I almost thought nothing had happened, and Tom and I were still in college. After a long time, I said, Tom, you never told me that you had anything to do with the Gao family. Was it fun to play with me? He was startled and smiled self-deprecatingly. I didn't play with you, Lisa. He explained the truth to me. On the eve of our breakup, his mother fell seriously ill, and it was the most dangerous time for the Fong family. So I didn't notice anything unusual about Tom. Later, a group of people suddenly came to the door, saying that Tom's father was the long-lost young son of the Gao family, and they declared that they would recognize Tom back. I wanted to cure my mother, so I agreed to their conditions to develop abroad. I was stunned. I never expected such a bloody plot to happen to him. I never believed that you would betray our relationship. No wonder he took over the Gao family 3 years ago. No wonder he was a poor boy when he was dating me. No wonder the Gao family suddenly came to help the Fong family overcome the crisis. There must have been Tom's involvement in this. Lisa, can you give me another chance? My heart was in turmoil, but Tom didn't ask me for an answer immediately. Instead, he told me to get a good rest. He said he would make the Gao family give me an explanation. That day, a stranger added me on WeChat and sent me good morning and good night messages every day. Not only that, but I would also receive a large bouquet of flowers and various gifts every morning. Because I hadn't inhaled too much incense, I recovered completely after 2 days of rest. After being discharged from the hospital, I immediately contacted the police to give a statement. Afterwards, I organized the evidence from the wedding and sent Rose to court. In the end, she was sentenced to 1 year in prison for attempted intentional injury. Not only that, but the court also ordered her to pay back the full 500,000 yuan for the wedding dress. But Rose had only been working for a year, and she had always spent money lavishly. Even if Mark had spent a lot of money on her, she couldn't afford this amount. So in the dock, she was completely dumbfounded and cried, begging me for forgiveness, even going so far as to kneel down and play the victim. If only she had known this earlier, why would she have done it? Of course, I didn't accept it. After all, she not only wanted to ruin my wedding, but also wanted to find a strange man to ruin my life. If it hadn't been for Tom who had driven that person away, I don't know what would have happened to me. Seeing that I was unmoved, Rose had to give up trying to persuade me and obediently mortgaged her property to pay off the debt. After dealing with her matter, I also learned from my friends about Mark's fate. The incident at the wedding where he helped his lover bully the bride made him famous in the circle. The Gao family stopped his credit card, and now he was begging everyone for money. But everyone knew that this money was probably a one-way street, and they all avoided him. Not only that, the Gao family also completely announced the deprivation of his inheritance rights. At this point, if he had just been a carefree young master, the Gao family wouldn't have ignored him, but he would no longer have the glory of the past. But Mark couldn't accept this gap, and he started to go to bars and drink alcohol. Unexpectedly, he accidentally hit a guardrail while driving under the influence and ended up disabled for life. When I heard this gossip, I just felt that he had brought it upon himself. Even without this announcement, with Mark's brain, how could he have the confidence to keep this inheritance? What I didn't expect was that the moment I finished listening to the gossip, the owner of the gossip arrived at my building downstairs. I hadn't seen Mark for half a month, and he looked 10 years older, with a scruffy beard and a disheveled appearance. As soon as he saw me, he pushed his wheelchair and handed me the flowers in his hand. Lisa, I remember you love roses the most. I didn't take his flowers but said, "What are you doing here? We're over." Mark said anxiously, "I know I was wrong. I was just confused for a moment. And now I've paid the price. You just give me another chance." This person was too predictable. He came to find me now, not because of remorse, but because he felt that as long as he married me, everything would return to the way it was before. And he could also get the Gao family's inheritance and restore his former glamorous life. I laughed. "Mark, do you want me to help you recall how you and Rose locked me in the dressing room, and how you slandered me? Why do you think I would forgive you?" Mark was speechless, his lips trembled slightly, but he couldn't say a word. At this moment, Tom's voice sounded behind him, "Lisa." He was wearing a black coat, looking calm and decisive, and in his hands was also a large bouquet of flowers. "Uncle," Mark's gloomy gaze swept over the roses in his arms, and finally he said incredulously, You've been together all along? Uncle, I respect you so much, and you actually did this. And you, Lisa, you've had a guilty conscience all along, haven't you? No wonder Rose said she saw you meeting a strange man in private. She was right." In his anger, he threw the flowers at my feet and began to speak rudely. "It's all your fault, you bitch, that my leg was ruined. It's all your fault." Mark, watch your words. Perhaps it was the bloodline suppression, or perhaps Tom's gaze was too cold. Mark shivered, realized what he had said, and his lips turned pale. Tom's voice was cold, and I inexplicably heard a hint of depression. "Also, I'm the one chasing her, and besides, I haven't caught her yet." He called his driver, ignored Mark's apology, and pushed his wheelchair away directly. I watched them leave and felt a mix of emotions. Half a month ago, I would never have imagined that this would be the ending. "Lisa," Tom came closer and said pitifully, "I've booked your favorite restaurant. Are you free tonight?" I couldn't help but think of what he said at the wedding. "Your taste has gotten so bad since you left me." He must have thought about it for days. Definitely, Mark came twice more, but I had the security guard send him away directly. After a long time, he realized that he couldn't get anywhere with me, and he gave up as if he had lost his heart. Under Tom's persistent pursuit, I finally agreed to his proposal. A year later, I married him, and the entire circle was shocked. My bridesmaid asked me, "First your nephew, then your uncle. Are you determined to marry someone from the Gao family?" I smiled. What she didn't know was that this time, I was marrying for love. Tom personally planned this wedding, and every detail was carefully designed, all in my favorite style. Not only was the venue several times larger than before, but the wedding dress was also rushed for a year, and it was 10 times more gorgeous than the custom-made dress before. When the officiant announced the exchange of rings, 2 figures burst in at the door, one sitting in a wheelchair, shouting that this was his wedding, and the other was disheveled, shouting that she was the bride. I didn't hear clearly, and I turned to ask, "What happened?" "It's nothing," Tom comforted me softly. "2 random people. Security has already dealt with it." I nodded and didn't pay any more attention. After this day, the Fong family and the Gao family formed a strong alliance, and my career and love would both flourish. As for Mark, after the wedding incident, his reputation was ruined, and after becoming paralyzed, he became a discarded son of the Gao family. No one remembered who he was.